أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه وخاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيد الأولين والآخرين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Inshallah, I don't want to speak for that long, maybe 15-20 minutes. On Yawmul Ashura, although of course we are sad and we will recount the events of shaam-e-Gharibaan, it's important for us also to reflect and perhaps gain knowledge of a few things. And I just want to share with you a very small reflection which actually continues on from yesterday's talk, which is who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now that these sort of 10-11 days are over or are coming to an end, what is our duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We left the battlefield and Hussein alayhi salam has been slaughtered. Zainab salamullahi alayha, they are all now being taken as captives and they are being taken to Kufa and then Sham. And we know that the bravery and courage of our dear lady Zainab, peace be upon her, is that she speaks from her heart to Ibn Ziyad and Yazid ibn Muawiyah, and she expresses to them their level of immorality, that their level of disgrace. And she uses the Quran, she uses the message of Rasulullah to explain to these tyrants, as they were tyrants, that the God that you believe in is not the God that I believe in. My God is the God that recognizes the good deeds of the righteous people, the Shuhada, Al-Husayn alayhi salam, her family. Whereas what they saw, the type of God they believed in, was an aggressive and brutal kind of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if they ever believed in Him anyway. What is therefore interesting for us as Shias, as Muslims, that we reflect on Karbala, the central issue is how do we get to know who God is? Let me share with you a hadith from Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam. And this is actually reported in Kitab al-Tawheed, compiled by Sheikh Saduq as well as Al-Kafi. Imam al-Kadhim said something very interesting when he was asked about the lowest degree of ma'rifatullah. What is the lowest degree of inner knowledge of God? What's the lowest one? He replies, the lowest knowledge of Allah is to affirm that there is no God but He, and that He has no likeness or match, and that He is eternal, perpetual, and everlasting. He is all existent and not absent, and that there is nothing like Him. The lowest knowledge of Allah is simply to say, La ilaha illallah. And to say He is Qadim, or to say Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, for example, to say that He doesn't have a like. This is the lowest knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we may ask ourselves a question on this night, which is, what kind of knowledge do we have about God? If till my last breath, the knowledge of Allah remains that, La ilaha illallah, and I do not know who God is, what my relationship is with Him, whether in fact, as we said in the Amal, that were Hussein, if he were to be alive today, and if he were to say, is there anyone who would help me? Would we be there with him? Would we understand his God? Would we understand his vision? This is the central question. And so what the seventh Imam is saying is very beautiful. He's saying that of course we have knowledge of God if we say La ilaha illallah, but it is the lowest form of knowledge. Therefore, if our knowledge is of that level, what can we do to move forward to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now, his father, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, he has a beautiful hadith, okay? And this is recorded in Kitabul Irshad, of course, by Sheikh Mufid, Al-Khisal, by Sheikh Saduq, as well as Amalia Tusi. So it's recorded in very respectable Shia books, classical Shia hadith sources. And this is what he says. He says something very beautiful about how we gain knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a big question. He says, وَجَدْتُ عِلْمَ النَّاسِ كُلَّهُ فِي أَرْبَعٍ. He said that I have found the knowledge of human beings, all of it, in 4 things. أَوَّلُهَا أَن تَعْرِفَ رَبَّكَ. The first of them is that you understand or know God. The first is that you understand your Lord. This is the first piece of knowledge for us, that you understand your Lord. An ta'arifa ma sa'ana bik. This is thani. The second one is that you should understand what He has done for you. If we want to understand God, we should understand what has God done for us. One of His names is As-Sani', which means literally kind of the fashioner or the molder or the maker. Here, the sixth Imam is saying, the second is you should understand what God has done for you, if we are to understand Him. الثالث أن تعرف ما أراد منك. And the third is that you should understand what He intends for you. What does Allah want from me and you? I can say La ilaha illallah, but what does Allah want from me? What did Allah want from Hussein and Zainab? Allah wanted, and this is what Hussein wanted, that he would remain in that battlefield despite being cut to pieces. On the day of Ashura, we recounted that these are words, if you like, which people think Hussein said, that, "Oh Allah, I have orphaned my children. Even though I'm going to be cut to pieces, I will still want to see you. I will still want to stand in this battlefield." So Hussein alayhi salam is saying that he understands what Allah wants from him, despite the fact that other people do not understand. Like the Kufans, who are confused and negligent people, they did not understand or respect what Allah expects from them. وَالرَّابِعُ أَن تَعْرِفَ مَا يُخْرِجُكَ مِنْ دِينِكَ. And the fourth is that we should understand what will make us exit from your religion, from God's religion. What would make us abandon or exit from God's religion? So what does that mean? If Allah dislikes something, says, don't drink alcohol, don't kill, don't lie, whatever it is, we have to understand those actions which would take us away from Allah, which would take us away from, as we say, ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, which would take us away from the right path. We are saying, guide us on this right path. The right path is a path of balance, a path where we are moving towards God, a path that is not going away or astray from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the fourth one is knowing what would take us away from the religion. If we just reflect, look at these 4 principles. Number 1, we have to understand who God is. Number 2, we understand what He has done for us, the blessings He has given us in this life. Number 3, we should understand what Allah expects from us. And number 4, we should understand what would take us away from our religion. These are 4 very simple principles that we can reflect on, even teach to our children, even, as I said, to teach it in madrasa. These are 4 very simple principles that anybody can pick up, start to reflect on, and build a life based on these 4 principles. As I said, our goal is to improve our inner knowledge of God, not to remain the same till our last breath. What a waste it would be of our life if when we go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't know who He is, what our purpose was, and whether we could have maximized our potential. What is the consequence of this knowledge if we follow these 4 principles? There is another hadith from As-Sadiq alayhi salam. And this is in Al-Kafi volume 8, right? This is, page 247. Imam Sadiq says the following. So this is, if you like, what feelings we would experience if we start to know Allah in this very deep manner. If people knew the virtue of knowing Allah, the mighty and exalted, they would never extend their gaze to the splendor and bounties of the life of this world that Allah has granted to the enemies. They would then regard such people's worldly goods to be more insignificant than the dust under their feet, and they would take great pleasure at attaining knowledge of Allah, the mighty and exalted, and would savor it as if they were tasting the experience of being in the gardens of paradise with the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Indeed, he says, Inna ma'arifat Allah azza wa jalla anusun min kulli wahsha wa sahibun min kulli wahda wa nurun min kulli dhulumatin wa quwwatun min kulli dha'fin wa shifa'un min kulli suqmin. Indeed, the knowledge of Allah is an intimate companion in every type of desolation or isolation, a friend in every type of loneliness, a light in every darkness, a source of strength from all weaknesses, and a cure from all illnesses. The knowledge of Allah is what the sixth Imam is saying. If we truly knew Allah as He should be known, we would not want to think or look at anything that takes us away from God. We live in this world, we are not meant to live in a cave. Allah has created the world for us. However, the world is a very distracting entity. And so what the sixth Imam is saying is when we look too much at the world, we take our gaze away from Allah. And we should understand that those people that love the world so much, as Yazid ibn Muawiyah did, as other people did, they are people that Allah says, fine, take the world. We grant it to you. Why does Allah grant the world to those people who love it so much? Because ultimately the world is temporary. The world will perish as our bodies perish. But the akhirah is everlasting. And so what is important for us is to seek knowledge and find contentment in Allah who is everlasting, in the things that He wants are everlasting. Hussein alayhi salam, what did he have on the battlefield? What did Zainab salamullahi alayha and Kulthum cry out? They said, "Oh Allah, this is your dear creature. This is your dear servant. He has nothing there with him except sand and blood. And this sand and blood is his ghusl." What did Hussein alayhi salam have? What did Imam Sajjad alayhi salam have? People used to report, of course, that in his whole life, he used to cry a great deal at the massacre of Karbala. That when he was buried, his body was bent. His back was bent. One, from the great massacre of Karbala, the amount that he went through, but also the amount of stress that he went through. What did he have to his name? What did Khadija salamullahi alayha have to her name? All of these great saints of Allah, if you see the way they lived, they gave everything for the sake of Allah. The world was only an instrument to them. All we will have when we pass away is our deeds. Our deeds will speak, and that's it. There's nothing more than that, really. And so the sixth Imam is saying, the more we gaze upon Allah, we will want to do things for Him. We will leave a legacy in this world that is not of wealth and material things, and these are only instruments. But when we have the wealth and material things, or whatever we have, the legacy will be the deeds that come out of these things. That is the key thing. And then we will find one beautiful thing, that when I seek knowledge of my Lord, certainly understanding Allah and saying His name, He is a companion in my loneliness. Allah is my friend in my loneliness. He is my light in every darkness. He is my source of strength from all weaknesses. and a cure for all my diseases. What do we think gave courage to Hussein alayhi salam? At that moment, when the arrow pierced Ali Askar's neck, and we read in the Maktal that he holds Ali Askar to the heavens, and he says, "Oh Allah, how can I bear this? What will happen?" Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala consoles him, or he hears the voice of a malaika, or his inner voice. And that inner voice is ma'rifatullah. For what do they say? They say, take him back to the mother. They say, Hussein alayhi salam, your death is near. You are returning to your Lord. This is the consolation. This is Allah being a companion to us in our time of need. Why? Because we have sacrificed, or in this case Hussein alayhi salam has sacrificed his understanding of life, his time, his body, simply to be close to Allah. If ever we think, how can I do something for Allah? We do not need to worry. Because once we make that niyat, once we start to gain knowledge of Allah, Allah befriends us. Allah becomes our companion. Salawat. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Brothers and sisters, imagine the scene. Hussein alayhi salam is beheaded. He is mutilated. The arrows and the spears are in his chest. And at that scene, Zainab, Kulthum, Sakina, the rest of the 10, they are crying and wailing. And they are crying out to Allah and complaining to Allah. But they are also complaining to Rasulullah, to their grandfather. They are saying, "Oh, our dear grandfather, we wish you were here to save us. We wish you were here to witness this, that your grandson has been mutilated in this way. What would you say, oh our dear grandfather, and how would you protect us?" Lady Zainab was gathering the women folk and the children, and they were crying and complaining to her. But they were also crying and complaining because they were asking, "Oh, Auntie Zainab, where is my uncle? Where is my relative? Where is my child? Where have they all gone?" Imagine children saying, "Are they coming back? Are they coming back to see us? Are we all gathering together again? Are we going back to Medina?" Imagine young children saying these things. And what could our Zainab say except to say that your uncle has been martyred. Your uncle has departed from this world. The widows and orphans were complaining of being slapped and lashed by the enemies, while some complained of their earlobes being torn apart at the removal of earrings and jewelry. Lady Zainab also saw that some children were still thirsty, some children were still ill, and some on the side of Yazid's camp said, "Have mercy on them, give them water." It is reported that Zainab and the rest were even reluctant to take the water, for they said that how shall you drink water when the son of the Messenger of Allah was killed with burning thirst? Can you imagine? They have to feed themselves. Of course they have to feed the children. But they have just seen the grandson of the Prophet being killed without being given a sip of water. When Hussein asked in the battlefield, "Please, give me a sip of water before my death," they said, "No, we refuse you a sip of water." He was only given blood, for when Shimr was sitting on his chest and hacking Hussein alayhi salam, his beard was drenched with blood. This was the predicament of Zainab. Umar ibn Sa'd then prepared for Kufa. He gave instructions that the women and the orphans of the camp of Hussein would be taken as captives and be taken to Ibn Ziyad. It is reported that Umar ibn Sa'd came to the tents and he said, "O household of Hussein, get out of the tents." The women did not pay attention. He repeated, get yourselves out from the tents. Lady Zainab said, O Ibn Sa'ad, let us be, do not come inside of here. Umar ibn Sa'ad repeated, O daughters of Ali, come out of the tents and prepare yourselves to be chained. Prepare yourselves to be taken as captive. Prepare yourselves to be imprisoned. Lady Zainab responded, please, by the love of Allah, have fear of Allah. Don't torment us. Lady Zainab still held firm, but Umar ibn Sa'ad gave instructions to set the tents alight. As the torches were thrown onto the tents, as the tents began to burn, the women started to run out. The barefooted young children began to run out. Their souls were burning. Their souls, they could not be accustomed to this scene, and they simply had to run out. There was a little girl, 3 or 4, whose garment had caught fire. Not knowing what to do in desperation, she ran out in the direction of the battlefield, saying, O Father, where are you? O Father, save me. Can children ever be without fathers and mothers? When the tents were set fire, Lady Zainab came to Imam Sajjad. She said, O Ali, the tents are burning, what should we do? Please, what should we do? The Imam said, flee from the tents and save your lives. Don't worry about me. The women and children crying and crying, all of them fled from the tent, except for Lady Zainab. When we talk about Lady Zainab, she was a warrior. She wasn't just a woman. She was a warrior protecting the tent, protecting Imam Sajjad. She embraced the Imam, covered the Imam, making sure that he was okay, trying to help him come out of the tent. Umar ibn Sa'ad still was giving the order. It is no longer safe for you to enter this tent. Why don't you flee with the rest of the women? A soldier cried. She cried, Lady Zainab cried, said, Oh soldier, we have a sick man within the tents who is unable to sit or walk. How should I leave him? And we know that when they were taken out of the tents, Imam Sajjad was put in chains to the extent that the chain around his neck was so tight, so piercing, that when he wanted to look back to make sure that the women were okay, the chain would hurt him. Can you imagine the scene? Imam Sajjad being dragged, the women being dragged. And when they reach Kufa, Lady Zainab says, O Kufans, woe upon you! Don't you realize which piece of Muhammad's heart have you cut? Which pledge have you broken? Whose blood have you shed? And whose honor have you dishonored? You have certainly committed such a crime, because of which the sky may fall down on the earth may crack, and mountains crumble to pieces. By killing your Imam, you have committed such a grave deed, and you will be punished. Do not regard the time and opportunity given to you by Allah as small. Do not be satisfied with it, because if Allah is not quick in acting, it doesn't mean He is unable. For Him there is no fear that the time of vengeance is passing away. Allah is certainly keeping watch over you. May Allah elevate the station of the Shuhada. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Matam al-Hussein.